Very good morning, students. Welcome back to online session on programming for problem solving course. In our previous sessions, we have started the program development steps. Okay, whenever we are writing a high level language program, what steps we follow, that thing we were discussing. So, yeah, in these steps, we have gone through the first two, we can say. I mean, in that second step still we need to discuss about pseudocode and flowchart. Okay, so we have seen what does it mean by understanding the problem, and how we start the development process. I mean, what sort of planning we will do in the second step that we started the discussion. Okay, so we said initially we'll whatever problem we were having, we'll develop a structure chart to that one. Okay, and then we'll go for algorithm. So in that algorithm, we said algorithm is nothing but it is a step-by-step approach for solving any given computational problem. Okay, so writing those steps, what kind of statements we can put inside an algorithm. We said the categories of algorithm. All those things we discussed, the characteristics, properties of an algorithm, that also we discussed, and we have also seen few simple examples of the algorithm. Okay, we have taken one real-time example of a recipe like making a cup of tea. So when we are preparing a cup of tea, what steps we follow, that steps I have narrated, and I have shown you how you can put all those steps in the form of an algorithm. And we said for any given problem there may be more than one algorithm. The reason, because the people get involved in that process may have their own thoughts, may have their own ideas of solving the given problem. So we cannot expect a single solution, a common solution between the people in order to solve a particular problem. Okay, for a single problem we may have n number of algorithms. Okay, so that conclusion also we have done in our previous discussion. So quickly we go and we see what we need to discuss in today's session. So that is nothing but, so we will discuss few more examples for algorithm, and if possible we'll try to start and wind up the pseudocode procedure. Okay, what we do, what is a pseudocode and how we write that pseudocode, and how it is helpful in the program development process, that we will see. Okay, so all these things, understanding the problem we have completed, developing the solution, in that the structure chart we have discussed, algorithm, the definition, and the properties we discussed, properties, characteristics, specifications we discussed. Then the real-time example, making a cup of tea, this also we discussed. Then categories of algorithms, that is sequential, um, conditional or selection, and finally the iterative or looping based. So all these things we discussed, categories of algorithm, and we said we can put any of these instructions inside our algorithm, that is assignment statement, input output statement, conditional statement, and iterative statements. We can keep any of these statements into our algorithm based on the requirement, based on the development process. A suitable statement will be selected, and it will be kept inside the algorithm. So how to write an algorithm, this also we discussed. We said there is no particular syntax, there is no particular language, there is no particular rule for writing the algorithm. You can use any of the natural language to write an algorithm. So that's the reason we said algorithm is a language independent thing. Okay, it is not language specific, syntax specific, it is completely a generalized thing. So anybody with domain knowledge, okay, the people who are writing the algorithm, only one requirement is there, they need to have the domain knowledge. Okay, suppose if you are developing a library application, any person with library transactions knowledge, he can write the algorithm. If you're developing an application for health sector, So any person with health sector knowledge, I mean, what sort of transactions takes place inside an hospital, that person can write the algorithm. Same in a bank, suppose if you are developing a banking application, in a bank, what sort of transactions takes place? Any person with that knowledge. So a person having the domain knowledge is nothing but a person having the knowledge of that particular area. Okay, so if a person is having that knowledge, he can write the algorithm. Okay, so then algorithmic examples. So in that we have discussed only these things: designing an algorithm to add, subtract, multiply, divide, and to find the remainder of two given numbers and display the result. In that I have shown the first one, how we add two numbers. Okay, whenever we are adding two numbers, so we set as it is a binary operation. Adding two numbers, it is a binary operation. Why it is binary means it will be performed between two operands, between two values. So that's the reason we said it is a binary operation. So adding two numbers, we need at least two values, isn't it? When you are adding two numbers, we need at least two values. So that two values, when the user is supplying or when the intender is supplying, immediately the machine or the person who is doing this calculation, they have to remember those two numbers, isn't it? The primary requirement, the basic requirement over there is they have to remember those two numbers. So for remembering is nothing but we have to store those two numbers inside our memory. Okay, so whenever we are storing two numbers, we are allocating a block of memory, isn't it? Two blocks of memory, because we are storing two numbers, so we are dedicating two blocks of memory from our internal memory. So the computer will also do the same thing. Whenever it stores two numbers, it will dedicate two blocks of memory for storing those two numbers. So after storing the numbers, it will do the addition of those two numbers and it will get a result, isn't it? After adding two numbers, it will get a result. So to store the result, it needs another block of memory. So overall, how many blocks? Three blocks of memory it needs. Two for storing the numbers and one for storing the result. Okay, so overall three blocks of memory we have to dedicate whenever we are performing the binary operations like add, subtract, multiply, divide, and modulo divide. All these operations are binary operations. So two for storing two numbers and one for storing the result. So in that same way we performed addition of two numbers here. See, we are starting. So this is how we said we are gonna write the algorithm. Each step we have to number in sequence, so as any person will know, okay, when any person will understand how exactly we have to perform the algorithmic operations. I mean, how exactly the algorithm needs to be processed over here. So for that purpose only we are giving these sequence numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So the first step we said, in every algorithm the first step will be the start and the last step will be the stop. Okay, in any algorithm we must put these two things, because one has to know where exactly he needs to start the algorithm processing and where exactly he needs to stop the algorithm processing. So because of that reason, the first and the last step we always put in this way: start and stop. So then declare the memory blocks. Okay, declare the memory blocks. So we said we need three memory blocks. So for the in that way we have declared 1, 2 and three memory blocks: num1, num2, num3. These are just the number names given to those memory blocks. Okay, these are just the names given to those memory blocks. So num1 is one memory block, num2 is another memory block, and sum is another memory block. So in these three we read only two numbers, okay, because the third value we will calculate, isn't it? So we are reading input num1 and num2. So input is a term used, I mean, we said we can use either input, read, okay, get, all those words you can use over here. Inputting in the sense giving to the algorithm. Okay, so num1 and num2, we are reading two numbers. Then what we are doing? We are calculating sum. Sum is equals to num1 plus num2. So this is something like a mathematical notation we are writing inside the algorithm. Okay, sum is equals to num1 plus num2. Mathematical notations are purely allowed inside your algorithm. You can go with that logic. No need to bother about it. Okay, whether a person will understand or not, don't bother about it. Simply put, because we are going to write only the basic level of mathematical notations. So next, after calculating the sum, what we have to do, we have to print this result, print this sum on the output screen. So for printing the result on the output screen, or for giving the output from the algorithm, we use print word. Okay, print word, print followed by sum. So this, what it will do, it will print the result on the output screen. Then stop. Okay, immediately we have to stop. So for calculating the subtraction, what we have to do, so all the steps will be same, isn't it? Only this term we can change. So when you are calculating the subtraction, only this third term you can change, because sum, it will not give the proper meaning inside the algorithm, isn't it? So instead of sum, as we are doing subtraction, what we put sub, S-U-B, subtraction. Okay. Then here what we do, in place of this sum, you just put sub, S-U-B, subtraction, is equals to num1, remove this one and put the minus symbol over here, num1 minus num2. Then print, here we print sub. That's it. In this way we write an algorithm to perform the subtraction of two numbers. Then multiplication of two numbers. Again, we need to change the words over here. In place of sub, we need to put multiplication. Then here also same thing, multiplication, M-U-L. Here also make it as star, multiplication, and print M-U-L. That's it. Then to perform the division, div. Okay, here also div, and remove this symbol and put forward slash, num1 divided by num2. Then print div, normal now, print div. Okay, finally when you perform the modulo division, here you can use mod, because you are performing modulo division, mod. Here also in place of division you put mod, mod. Okay, so I will remove all these things and I will perform only for multiplication, sorry, modulo division. Remove all this. Okay, then now we are performing modulo division so that you can understand it very easily. So what corrections I have to do? Yeah, num1, num2 as it is I need, but sum I don't need. As I am performing modulo division, I need to change it to mod. So here also you need to put mod, modulo division. And here this symbol you remove and put percentile symbol. The modulo division, it will return the remainder of the division operation. Then here you put mod. Okay, remainder of the division operation, in the sense, let us assume the two numbers as num1 and num2 as, I'm reading num1, let us say, equals to 5. Okay, then num2 equals to 2. Let us assume like this, we are reading num1 and num2. Then perform modulo division. Mod equals to, what is num1? 5. What is the operation? Modulo division. Then what is 2? What is num2? 2. So this operation when you perform, see, here you will get 5, here you put 2, isn't it? So how many times? 2 2's. It will be 4. Okay. Then what remainder you will get? You will get the remainder 1. So this operation when you perform modulo division operation, so your mod value will become 1, because it will return the remainder. Whatever remainder you are getting inside the division operation, that remainder it will return. Okay, the normal division operation, what it takes? The normal division operation when you perform between num1 and num2 with those same values, num1 division num2 with those same values, what you will get? Here num1 is 5, divide with 2. the quotient you will get, this value you will get, that is 2. Okay, you will get 2. But when you perform the modular division, you will get the remainder. Okay, you will not get quotient, you will get the remainder. Take another example for modular division. I am giving 10 modular division 2. Okay, what mod value you will get over here? You will get 0, because 10 will be perfectly divided with 2 without any remainder. 10 will be perfectly divisible by 2 without any remainder. So that's the reason you are getting the remainder as 0. Again, one more example. 10 modular division 3. What will be the remainder? Remainder will be 1. Okay, perform it. 10 with 3 we said. 3 3s how much? 9. So what is the remainder? 1 you will get. So likewise you are getting remainder 1 over here. Okay, same value 24 modular division 5. How much you will get? 24 modular division 5, you will get 4. Okay, 24 modular division 5, you will get 4. The reason? Simply perform it. 24 5. 5 fours 20. So what is the remainder? 4. 4 is the remainder. So you will get 4 over here. Okay, one such example I will give in assignment also. So you need to practice this thing. So just remember whenever you are performing the division operation, the normal division operation will yield the quotient, but whereas the modular division operation will yield the remainder. You have to remember this one. Okay, so take another example for an algorithm, problem statement 2. So design an algorithm to calculate the interest of a bank deposit. So how we calculate the simple interest? PTR by 100. Okay, where P is the capital amount, T is the time period for how much time you're taking the interest, and R is the interest rate of interest we can say. Okay, yearly how much rate of interest. That rate of interest, if you write PTR, if you divide that thing with 100, you will get the actual interest of bank deposit. Okay, for the given period. So how many inputs we have to give to this algorithm in order to calculate the simple interest? First thing is we said the formula PTR by 100, isn't it? We said the formula is PTR divided with 100. Okay, where P is the capital amount, T is the time period, R is the rate of interest. So 3 inputs we have to give to this algorithm. How many inputs? 3 inputs we have to give, and to store the result, that is after calculating this one, to store the result we need I, isn't it? So now how many blocks of memory I need to reserve for this particular algorithm in order to solve this simple thing? Okay, I need to reserve 4 blocks of memory. One to store the capital amount, one to store the time period, another to store the rate of interest, and finally to store the final result of this calculation, that is interest value. Okay, interest value, that is I. So 4 blocks of memory I need to reserve. 4 blocks of memory I need to reserve. And when you are reserving 4 blocks of memory, how many blocks you are reading from the keyboard? 3 blocks you are reading, 3 values you are reading, and the 4th value you are calculating. Based on this formula, the 4th value you are calculating. Okay, so that calculated value we will print on the output screen. Okay, so simply step 1 will be start, then declare IPTR. Okay, IPTR. Maybe we have taken some different names over there. Accordingly, we will go. Okay, then after declaring IPTR, we need to read PTR. Read only our input PTR. After inputting PTR, calculate I using this formula. I is equals to PTR divided by 100. After calculating I, what we have to do? Print I and stop. That's it. So simply go and check over there. Yes, here you can see first step we are starting. Using start we are starting the algorithm, the starting point. Then we are declaring 4, you can see here. Okay, 4 blocks of memory: amount, year, rate and interest. 4 blocks of memory we are declaring. So here amount is nothing but your P, year is nothing but your time, R is rate is nothing but your rate of interest R. Then I is nothing but interest. So like this. After that, what we said? Input, amount, year, and rate. Only three things we are inputting. Only three things we are inputting, and the fourth thing, that is interest, we are calculating. Interest is equals to PTR by 100. P is nothing but amount multiplied with years multiplied with rate of interest, then divide with 100. Once you do this calculation, what will happen? You will get the interest value. How much interest you will get, or how much interest the bank has to pay for the deposited amount, that you will get over here, interest. So once you get the interest calculation, print this interest value on the output screen. So print interest, then stop. That's it. Very simple it is. So whenever you see a simple problem, a problem statement, immediately you need to you need to track the solution in this particular way. That means how many blocks of memory I need to reserve in order to solve, what type of formulae it takes, the problem takes to solve, what type of logic the problem takes to solve. And in that logic, how many variables we have. Okay. So for each variable, we need to reserve one block of memory. Isn't it? For each variable, we need to reserve one block of memory. After that, what type of variables I need to read, what type of values I need to take from the outside world, that you need to decide. So once you have input in your hand, then calculate, perform that logic. After performing the logic, you will get the result of that logic. That result you need to print on the output screen. That's it. Simple thing we are doing in every algorithm, and believe me, from this point till the end of this semester, we'll do the same thing. Okay, we'll have some problem statement in hand, and for that problem statement, we'll try to get the output, or we'll try to get the solution. And in that finding the solution process, what type of input we need, and what type of logic processing we need, and what type of output we will get, and once we get the output, we'll display the output. That's it. Okay, take another example, another problem statement. Design an algorithm to determine whether the temperature is below or above the freezing point. Okay, below or above the freezing point. So what is freezing point? 32 degree Fahrenheit. Okay, 32 degree Fahrenheit is the freezing point. So we got the freezing point. So what we need, what additional thing, whether the temperature is below or above the freezing point. When he is saying temperature, he means the current temperature, wherever you are standing or wherever your location is. In that particular location, what is the current temperature? We stays in Hyderabad, so what is the current temperature in Hyderabad? So that temperature we will read. Okay, that temperature we will take from somewhere. Okay, so simply what we have to do, we need to check that temperature whether it is above or below the freezing point. So let us say you found that the temperature today in Hyderabad, it is somewhere near let us say some assume it like 100 Fahrenheit. I'm just taking the example. Okay, 100 Fahrenheit. So whether it is above or below the freezing point, it is above the freezing point, isn't it? It is above the freezing point. Let us say the temperature is 10 degree Fahrenheit. 10 degree Fahrenheit. Then it is below the freezing point. How we are saying? Simply we are comparing, we are performing a kind of comparison between the temperature what we have read and between the temperature what they have given. Okay, they have given the temperature as freezing point as 32 degree Fahrenheit. If the temperature is above this, we have to print the temperature is above the freezing point. If the temperature is below this, we have to print the temperature is below the freezing point. Okay, so whatever statements I'm framing over here when I'm explaining this thing, the same statements will write inside the algorithm. So the first statement, what we do here, we need only one variable. We need only one, because one they have given. Okay, the freezing point they have already given, so no need to read this freezing point. We know it that it is 32 degree Fahrenheit. So no need to read this freezing point. So what we need to read, we need to read the current temperature of our location. Where exactly we are staying, we need to read the current temperature. That's it. Okay. So how many memory blocks we need? Only one memory block we need to read the current temperature. That's it. So we'll start, then we read, then we declare one memory block, and after that we read that memory block's value, the current temperature. Then we compare the current temperature with freezing point. If current temperature, if current temperature is below the freezing point, if current temperature is below the freezing point, how we do that comparison? If current temperature is less than freezing point, that is less than 32 degree, okay, if current temperature is less than 32 degree, we print a statement, output or print temperature is below freezing point. That's it. We print this statement on the output screen, a message on the output screen. Then if whatever temperature you have read, if it is greater than the freezing point, greater than the freezing point, then what we print? We print the temperature is above the freezing point. That's it. Simply go and check that one. See here, what we are doing, we are starting the algorithm. Okay, we are starting the algorithm in the first step. Then declare only one memory location or only one memory block, that is temperature. Declare temperature. Then what we are doing? Input temperature. We are reading the temperature value. How much is the current temperature? That temperature value we are reading over here. Then I said we need to frame a condition over here. It is a selection statement or conditional statement, we can say. Okay, first you just try to understand this one, then I will give the explanation on this one. Okay, if it is something like a condition checking, or if this is something, okay, what we say, it is something like a selection statement. If this thing, if temperature is less than 32, okay, whatever temperature value we are reading, if temperature is less than 32, if this thing is true, if this condition is true, then what we do? We print a statement below freezing point. Okay, temperature is below freezing point. We'll print this one and will not go to else part, because else means what? If this condition is false. Okay, if temperature is not less than 32, then we have to go for else part, isn't it? Okay, if this is true, go with this. If this is false, then go to the else part. Understood? So in our day-to-day life also, whenever we have to say such a statement, okay, whenever we have to say such a statement, will frame in this way only, isn't it? Will frame our statement in regular English in this way only. Let us assume there is a voting going on, election going on. So what is the rule for doing for voting, for casting vote inside the election? What is the rule? Your age, it should be more than 18 years. Then only you can cast your vote. Isn't it? That is the minimum requirement, or that is the basic requirement, we can say, in order to cast the vote. So if somebody wants to frame a statement to convey this message, whatever I just said, whatever rule I just said, if they want to frame a statement in order to convey this message, how they will frame? If your age is more than 18 years, if your age is more than 18 years, then only you can cast the vote. Okay, if your age is more than 18 years, then only you can cast the vote. Otherwise, you can't. Isn't it? Otherwise, you can't. So, if I am saying, then I am keeping the condition over there. If age is greater than 18 years, if age is greater than 18 years, cast the vote. Otherwise, don't cast. Okay, so this means when I am writing that one over here, see, if I write that same thing over here, if age is greater than 18, greater than or equals to, isn't it? Greater than or equals to 18 years, then print cast vote. Okay, otherwise, else print don't cast. Simple statements I have written, don't cast. Okay, so if suppose let us assume my age is 12 years. My age is 12 years. Can I cast the vote? Can I cast the vote? No. How you are saying no? How this algorithm is saying no means because it is checking this condition. If age is 12. Okay, 12 is greater than or equals to 18, I am saying. This is false, isn't it? This is false. So if this is false, it will go to the else part. It will not go to the immediate statement. It will go to the else part. Whenever the condition you have given, if it is false, it will go to the else part. So else part is saying don't cast. So I am unable to cast the vote. Same thing if my age is some, let us say 24 years this time. If my age is 24 years. If my age is 24 years. Age equals to 24, I'm saying. So now what will happen if 24 is greater than or equals to 18? This particular statement, it is true, isn't it? This logic is true. This condition is true. So then immediately what we will do, instead of going to the else part, we'll go to the if part only. We'll go to this only. So this part is saying cast vote. So I can cast my vote. So in that way, so whenever this condition is true, okay, whenever this condition is true, we'll print this message, the first message. Okay, this is when that condition is true. And if this condition is false, we'll print the second one. We'll print this second one whenever the condition is false. So let us say when I'm checking the temperature in my current location, when I'm checking the temperature value, I found it as some 100. I found it as some 100 degree Fahrenheit. So is it above the freezing point or below the freezing point? It is above the freezing point. So how come my algorithm is satisfying this one in the sense it will put this 100 degree Fahrenheit at the place of temperature. So 100 degree Fahrenheit is less than 32 degree Fahrenheit, we are saying. 100 degree is less than 32 degree. So this condition is false. So if it is false, we are going to this one and we are printing above the freezing point. So same thing, if the temperature, let us say it is 24 degree Fahrenheit, 24 degree Fahrenheit, then simply put that 24 degree Fahrenheit over here, 24 degree Fahrenheit. Then this 24 we are comparing with 32 and we found that this is 24 is less than 32 and this is true. So if this is true, we need to go to this statement, immediate statement. So that is below freezing point. In that way we are printing these messages. Hopefully you understood this entire thing. So we'll try to solve another one. Design an algorithm to find the biggest in two numbers. So what we are doing over here, we are reading two numbers and we are finding which one is greater and which one is lesser. Here we don't need a third memory location because we are not calculating any result. We are simply comparing two numbers. And if the num1 and num2, let us assume we are reading num1 and num2 like this. So we'll write a logic in such a way that we'll do the comparison between these two numbers. Let us say if num1 is greater than num2, like this. If suppose we have written the logic, we have framed the condition, num1 is greater than num2. Okay, then if this is true, then what we have to print? If this is true, we have to print a message that num1 is big, isn't it? Num1 is big. Simple statement. Print this one. Num1 is big. And if let us suppose if you are whatever comparison you are performing, if this is false, okay, if num1 value is lesser than num2, in that case what will happen? This will become false. And if this is false, we need to go to the else part. We need to go to the else part and we need to print a message that if num1 is not greater than num2, then which one is greater than? Which one is big? If num1 is not big, then automatically, because we are doing the comparison between two numbers only. And if num1 is not big, ultimately num2 will become big. So print num2 as big. Num2 is big. So like this. Num2 is big. Very simple understanding you need to have over here. Okay. So we are framing a condition, and if that condition is true, we are printing the immediate statement, and if that condition is false, we are going to the else part. Likewise, you have to remember. So let us take we'll try to solve by taking a simple example over here. We'll try whether this logic will give the perfect result, accurate result or not. So let us say I'm taking num1 and num2 values. My num1 I'm saying 100, okay, and my num2 I'm saying 24. Then what will happen? According to this logic, what will happen? Here 100 will come, and greater than I'm saying 24, num2. So what it is? Is this condition is true or false? It is true. 100 is greater than 24. It is true, isn't it? So whenever this thing is true, what we have to do? We have to print num1 is big. What is num1? 100. So we are printing 100 is big. Likewise. So it is giving the accurate result. If it is giving the perfect result. Take the opposite. Okay. Make num1 as 6 and num2 as some 32. So now what will happen? Where we have to put this 6 and 32? So simply I will erase the previous results. Okay, now take this one. So now num1 is 6. So here I have to put 6. Then num2 is 32. Here I have to put 32. So again check. Num1 is greater than num2. 6 is greater than 32. This condition 6 is greater than 32. This condition is false, isn't it? This is not true. This is false statement. So it is framing a false statement over here. Then immediately what we have to do? We have to go to the false part, that is else part. So when we are going to the false part, we are printing num2 is big. So what is num2? Num2 is 32. 32 is big, we'll get like that. So again it is giving the correct result only. So in this way, this logic will give the perfect result for all possible cases. So this is how we find the biggest number in 2. This logics you have to remember. This finding biggest number is in two numbers. Generally they will ask a flowchart to draw for this one, and it is a 2 marks question. Okay, this logic, if you remember, you can easily get 2 marks. See here the algorithm. We are starting. Then as I said, we need to declare only 2 memory locations, that is num1, num2. Then we have to read the values for num1, num2. Read the values for num1, num2. Then if num1 is less than, here in my explanation I have taken greater than over here, but here they are taking less than. No issues. In both the cases you will get the perfect result. So num1 is less than num2, they are saying. Then print num1 is big. So whenever this condition goes to false, we are printing, sorry, whenever this condition goes to true, we are printing num1 is greater than num2. So num1 is big. Else we are printing num2 is big. Likewise. Okay. Actually it has to be greater than only. Because first case we are printing num1 is big, so it has to be greater than only. Whatever I have explained over here, that is correct only. Okay. So take it num1 is greater than num2. Okay, if this condition is true, then print num1 is big. If this condition is false, then print num2 is big. Likewise. Hopefully you understood. So then the next thing, another example, design an algorithm. Let me just check how much time. Okay, almost 40 minutes. So design an algorithm to determine whether the student is passed in an exam or not. Okay, so for this, yes, exactly. Okay, for this what we are doing is we are reading, we need to check whether a particular student is passed in a particular exam or not. Okay, so let us say we are conducting an exam for 6 different subjects. So based on what we say whether the student is passed in that exams or not, in the sense, don't go for individual subject wise. Okay, we are not going individual subject wise. We are checking the overall percentage. Okay, overall percentage, how we calculate? We need to sum the individual marks. We need to sum the individual marks of that students in all different subjects. Finally, whatever marks he is securing and whatever the total marks, then they have to, I mean, the student has to secure, you divide that one. And whatever result you are getting, okay, that percentage, okay, based on that percentage, we are deciding whether the student is passed or failed. So quickly go to the algorithm, and over here you see what we are doing. Just try to understand this algorithm. Okay, the first step, the start step, then we said we are reading 6 subject marks. Okay, so M1, M2, M3, M4, M5, M6. This is not your mathematics. Okay, mathematics 1, mathematics 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, not like that. This is something marks 1, marks 2. Okay, or subject 1 marks, subject 2 marks, subject 3 marks, subject 4 marks, 5, 6 marks, like that we have done. Then we are calculating the average. Okay, then we are calculating the average, and if at all the average is below 60%, so we are making the cutoff as 60%. So if the average, if the cutoff is below 60%, we are saying the student is failed. Otherwise, the student is passed. If the cutoff is above 60%, the student is pass. Okay, so that consideration, I mean, what we have to do first, we need to read all 6 different subject marks. Okay, so that is M1. We have declared 7 variables including average. Now we are reading only 6 variables because we need to read 6 subject marks, and average we will calculate based on the subject marks. We need to calculate the average. So M1, M2, M3, here it needs to be M3. M4, M5 and M6. 6 subject marks we are reading. Then we are calculating the average by summing up all these marks. M1 plus M2, M3, M4, M5, M6 divided with 6. Okay, 6 subjects. So whatever average you will get, whatever average you will get, based on that average we are saying whether the student is pass or fail. So if the average is below 60%, so whatever average we will get over here, if it is below 60%, we are simply making a comparison over here. Okay, if the average is below 60%, we are saying the student is pass. So when this is true, we are saying the student is fail. So if this is false, that means the student has secured more than 60%. If this is false, the student has secured more than 60%. So at that case, we are saying the student is pass. The first case, the student is fail, and the second case, the student is pass, because we said average is less than 60. Okay, if this condition is true, the student is fail. Average is less than 60, that means the student is fail. If the average is greater, that means if this condition is false, if average is greater than 60%, then the student is pass. So in that way, very simple understanding, very simple logic processing, no complicated formulas or something I have used over here. Very simple, very basic mathematics I have done over here. Okay. Then design an algorithm to check whether the given number is even or odd. Let me just check. Okay, this is the last thing we have over here. This is the last example we have over here. We'll wind up this one, and quickly we'll have some examples on pseudocode. Then we'll wind up this lecture, hopefully. So design an algorithm to find the given number is even or odd. So checking whether the number is even or odd, basically in our real time, how we do. So I have given a number to you and I am asking you to tell whether the number is even or odd. So let us say I am giving 100, whether it is even or odd. So immediately you will say it is an even number. How you will say that one? You will divide. I mean, in order to check whether the given number is even or odd, we need to divide that number with 2. Isn't it? We need to divide that number with 2 and we need to check the remainder. We need to check the remainder. If the remainder is 0, whatever number you are dividing with 2, if the remainder is 0, we call that number as an even number. If the remainder is 1, okay, if the remainder is 1, then we call that number as an odd number. So whenever you are dividing any particular number from the number series or from the number sequence, you will get either 0 or 1, the result. Okay, you will get the result as either 0 or 1. So whenever the result is 0, the number is even number, and whenever the result is 1, the number is odd number. And this thing we are saying only for the natural numbers. We are not talking about whole numbers. Okay, natural numbers in the sense 0 to positive infinity. Okay, so for that, how we frame the logic, we need to read only one number over here. We don't need to read more than one, because only one number we are reading and we are checking that number is even or odd. Okay, so to check, I mean, to divide the given number with 2 and to get the remainder with regular division operation, it is not possible, because regular division operation, it will give the quotient, and we don't need the quotient over here. What we need the remainder. We need to check the remainder whether it is 0 or not. Okay, so how to get the remainder of a division operation? With the help of modular division. I mean, we discussed in our first example, we discussed whenever you do the modular division operation, you will get the remainder, and that remainder will do the comparison with 0, and if that is true, we said the number is even number. And if that remainder, if it is 1, I mean if it is not 0, we say that number is an odd number. It's very simple. Okay, so let us say, first what we need to do, we need to start. Then what we need to do, declare a number, declare num. Okay, then what we have to do, read num, then if at all, after reading the number, I'm roughly writing over here. In my next slide, I have in a standardized manner, if at all, okay, num value modulo division 2 equals to 0. Okay, if this operation, whatever we are performing, it is resulting 0, then print num is even. Num is even. Whatever number you have read, that is even. Else, what we need to do? Else print num is odd. Very simple explanation. Okay, if this statement, if this division operation, it is resulting to 0, then if this particular thing is true, then we are saying the number is even. And if this same division operation, modular division operation, if it is resulting to other than 0, that is 1. Okay, if this division operation remainder you are getting 1, then it is an odd number. Means this condition will become false. Whenever this operation results 1, this condition, we are saying 1 equals to 0. Okay, 1 equals to 0. That is wrong. That is false. So this you will get. Number is odd. So let us take the num as 4 over here. If at all num is 4, then what will happen? 4 modulo division 2. 4 modulo division 2. Modulo division in the sense it will give the remainder. 2 2's 4. What is the remainder? What will be the remainder? Remainder is 0. So when you are getting the remainder 0 here, 0 equals to 0 we are saying. So condition is true. So when that condition is true, yeah, you have to go for true case. That is number is even. So 4 is even. Like that you will get on the output screen. So the next thing, take another example. Num value as 9 you take, or 17 you take. Num value as 17 you take. So now 17, okay, we are performing modular division. 17 divide with 2. 2 8's 16. What will be the remainder? Remainder is 1. So here you will get 1. So 1 equals to 0. Condition is false. So go to the false case. That is num is odd. You will get this message. 17 is odd. Likewise, this algorithm will satisfy our need, our requirement. So go and check this one. Here same thing. Okay, here we are calculate this remainder. As you can see, we are not using anywhere in our algorithm. So no need of this rem. Okay, declare only num. That's enough. So start the algorithm, then declare num, read num. Okay, then if at all num modulo division 2 equals to 0. If this is true, then what we are doing, we are printing num is even, if this is true. And if this is false, we are printing, we are going to the else part and we are printing num is odd. Likewise, very simple processing, and we are stopping over here. That's it. So the next concept, we have the pseudocode. What exactly this pseudocode and how it is different from an algorithm, and what things we have to keep in our mind when we are writing the pseudocode. Okay, all these things we are going to discuss over here. So pseudocode, when you do the comparison with algorithm, it is more informal way. It is more informal way of writing the algorithm. Complete thing, every single step without any mathematical notations. We have to describe it like a rough paperwork we have to write. Pseudocode in the sense. Like a rough paperwork we have to write. How we are going to solve the given problem. That understanding when you are writing on a paper without proper steps, without proper what we call a description, if you are doing everything in an informal way, a rough work kind of thing, we call that thing as a pseudocode. Okay, nowadays nobody is writing pseudocode. Directly we go from algorithm to flowchart. Okay, remember this one. See the pseudocode, why we are writing in the sense, if a person, if he is not understanding, any person, if he is not understanding the algorithm, whatever it is there inside the algorithm, then we go for pseudocode. Pseudocode, completely lame code. Even a normal person, even a lame person without any knowledge of mathematics, without any knowledge, even he has to understand that one. So that is the purpose behind writing the pseudocode. Nowadays, no such customer exists in the market, and no such customer is there, or no such what we call user is there in our day-to-day life for writing pseudocode. So that's the reason we are not writing pseudocodes for our problem statements. So just as it is there in our syllabus, just as it is there in the what we call program development process, we need to understand this pseudocode as well. Okay, so the definition, if you see pseudocode, it is English like statements that follows a loosely defined syntax. There is no perfect proper syntax for writing pseudocode also. Okay, and are used to convey the design of an algorithm. How we going to write the algorithm, that thing we will do over here. So or whatever is written in the algorithm, because it is coming between algorithm and flowchart. So whatever is written inside the algorithm, if a flowchart designer or if a program designer, if any of the statements he is not understanding, with the help of pseudocode will try to convey that message. Okay, it is used to convey the design of an algorithm. Okay, so pseudocode is an informal way of programming description that does not require any strict programming language syntax. Okay, so here we are not going to follow any programming language syntax. Even I'm telling you, right, even the mathematical notations will not put. As much as possible, we'll try to remove the mathematical notations as well inside the pseudocode. Okay, pseudocode is a methodology that allows the programmer to represent the implementation of an algorithm. So what sort of steps you kept inside the algorithm, based on what you kept, why we are going from step 1 to step 2 in the algorithm, everything you need to describe. Okay, everything you need to describe. So when I said I is equals to PTR by 100, why I am using that formula? So because I have the knowledge that in order to calculate the interest for a bank deposit, I need to use that formula. But if a third person who doesn't know how to calculate the bank deposits interest, if he sees that formula, he will get confused, isn't it? So we need to convey him that this formula we are using because of this reason. So that complete description also we need to put inside the pseudocode. Hopefully you understood. So pseudocodes are used to represent algorithms so that they can be interpreted by programmers irrespective to their programming language background. Okay, irrespective to their programming knowledge background or irrespective to their domain knowledge. Okay, suppose a BTech student or technical student, if he is developing any banking application, let us assume, if they are calculating some complex stuff inside that banking application, so definitely they will write one complex formulae over there. So that complex formulae, what exactly it is doing over there, the technical people, they will not understand. Okay, the banking formulas, the calculating the simple interest or complex interest, all those formulas, the banking people, I mean the technical people, they will not understand. So definitely when a person is writing a pseudo code for that application, for that banking application, he need to mention for what purpose he is writing that formula over there. Okay, so in that way, the pseudocode will help even a lame person to understand the algorithm. Okay, pseudocode, as the name suggests, it is a false code. So when we are saying pseudo means it is a false code. False means not true generally, because there is no compiler or there is no interpreter to interpret the pseudocode and to get the output. It is only for the understanding. Okay, between the parties, to get the proper understanding of the problem, we use these kind of things, pseudocode. Okay, and it is also programming language independent. Okay, so pseudocode has no syntax like any of the programming language. It can't be compiled or interpreted by the computer. Just now I said that one, because pseudocode, it is a false code. It is not at all a programming language code. So there is no compiler or there is no interpreter who can interpret or who can compile the pseudocode for us. Okay, so it is purely for the understanding between the parties we are generating pseudocode. Advantages of pseudocode: it can be understandable by programmers of all programming languages. So as it is not specific to any programming language, it is completely a generalized statement or generalized thing in nature. So any programming language background programmer can understand that pseudocode. Okay, pseudocode acts as a bridge between the program and the algorithm or flowchart. So between these things, when you are translating a algorithm into a flowchart, or when you are translating a flowchart into a program, this pseudocode will act like a bridge. Bridge in the sense, if there is something that you are not understanding inside the algorithm or inside the flowchart, you can refer this pseudocode for proper understanding. Okay, so pseudocode work as a rough document. Already I told you this one. Pseudocode means it is like a rough work that you are doing on a paper. So you people, because many times I have seen this kind of thing in examinations, because we used to work like invigilators over there. So many people, what they will do is, when they see the paper, before if there is a problem, let us say if there is a problem, you got a problem in physics or in your mathematics, you got a problem. So when you see the problem, before doing it exactly, I mean step by step manner, in a structured manner, in a actual manner, uh, or we can say in your continuation, what you do, you will do the rough work in the background, isn't it? You will take the last page of your answer script, answer booklet, and there you do some rough work, rough calculation to get the answer of that problem, isn't it? That rough work is nothing but your pseudocode. Hopefully you understood. So the main goal of pseudocode is to explain what exactly each line of a program should do. Okay, hence making the code construction phase easier for the programmer. So when you are writing the algorithm, or when you are writing the when you are drawing the flow chart, if there is anything missing, if there is any understanding is missing, then we have to go for pseudocode. Okay, hopefully you understood. These are the advantages of pseudocode. So here you can see, this is the program code, C code, what we have written, and this is the pseudocode, how we have written. So if I is less than 10, then curly brackets we have used, then I plus plus I have used. So for you it is not understandable, isn't it? You're not understanding this parenthesis, why we are keeping over here, this curly brackets, why we are keeping over here. Of course, anybody who is reading this if, as it is your English word only, you can understand. Okay. So if you read the pseudocode, see this program code I have explained with the help of pseudocode. Just read this one. If I value is less than 10, if I value is less than, if I is less than 10, increment I value by 1. So this code is saying this one. So reading the code you are not understanding, but reading the pseudocode you are understanding. If I is less than 10, increment I value by 1. So then what will happen whenever the I value goes less than 10. Let us say I value is 9 over here. Okay, let us say I value is 9 over here. Then what we have to do? Increment I value by 1. So I make I value as 9 plus 1 equals to 10. Likewise. So if I value is, let us say if I value you take as 100, then what we have to do? If I value, that is if 10 is less than if 100 is less than 10, this condition is going false. So immediately we should not increment the value, we have to leave. When we have to increment, only when the I value is less than 10, then only you have to increment I value by 1. Hopefully you understood. So pseudocode examples we have for the same problem statements, whatever we have done in our previous case, that same thing we do over here in case of pseudocode. So that we will do in our next class, because it is already more than 1 hour. So thank you very much, students.